5 million fans tuned in on Sunday, October 21st to watch the final episodes of Rick Grimes. A little bump up in the live plus same day ratings, which isn't surprising since the overall feelings about the start to this season are mostly positive. The previous episode ended with a mystery attack of Savior Justin, and this episode is bookended by the reveal of what happened to him with the reveal of who did it to him. Now, let's go deeper into The Walking Dead episode 903, Warning Signs. Picking up where episode 902 left off, we see what happened to Justin. He's been wounded in the chest and killed. Cut to Rick starting his day, kissing a sleeping Michonne without her consent, touching Judith's head, checking for a fever, and placing his hand over Carl's handprint that must have been cut from the porch and put up on display in the house, much like a post-apocalypse family photo. Michonne had a moment last season when she found the art piece that Carl and Judith made with his final hours of life. Then Rick leaves his house in a scene inspired right from the source material. Rick walks out to the garden, giving us a panning shot of their progress over the time skip. He picks up a fresh tomato, which will grow more symbolic over this episode, staying true to the theme that they've carefully built up in the last 2 episodes. Now remember back in season 8, Carl found a fellow survivor we would come to know as Sadiq, but when they first met, Rick scared him off, saying,
"I shot over his head. I just wanted him gone."
Then after finding the trash group all slaughtered and Jadis alone, useless to them now, Rick again scares her off, telling Michonne,
"I shot above her head. I just wanted her gone. I didn't want her dead. I just wanted her gone."
And it appears to remind him of what Carl said. It'll take more than hope. They need action. Before Carl died, he told Rick about his vision of the future, predicting,
"There's new houses, crops, people working, everybody living, helping everybody else live."
And we see Negan tending to a fresh growing tomato crop. It hasn't been easy, but so far, Rick has kept his promise to Carl. He made it real. And with that, Rick places a tomato on Carl's gravesite. Next, we see Rick entering the bedroom and Michonne sitting up in bed, working on plans for future laws. Now, she secretly wipes away blood from her elbow, which either means this isn't the same day as when Rick got up a few minutes ago, or they forgot to show the blood in the beginning when she rolls over. Either way, this continues in the next episode, where Michonne can't sleep and she possibly hunts walkers. Anyway, a nice scene plays out here, setting Michonne up as possibly one of the future leaders of Alexandria when Rick dies. Ending this scene, they say they want to try for a baby of their own, making some fans excited about the Grimes legacy continuing on after the big time skip coming up. Now cut to Maggie and Cal. They're on the road, bringing their half of the trade to the worksite for the Saviors. And in a way that's reminiscent of previous events, the Saviors block the road. Even though they are working together, the tension is thick between them, mainly between Maggie and Jed. When asked for his name, he responds, Mud, and calls Maggie the widow. The widow is self-explanatory and seems to be an insult, meaning she's nothing more than a wife who lost her husband. In his eyes, she's no leader. When one's name is Mud, it means one is in disgrace or unpopular. Now, Arat and Laura apologize for him and are more cooperative than other Saviors, but things are only getting worse when Maggie and Cal see the undead Savior Justin walking out of the woods. We break from the tension to see some rare downtime, especially with Rick and Michonne. They're having a play date with Judith. These moments are largely left off screen, but it makes sense here leading up to Rick's departure. Plus, I mean, come on. We get this scene. And if you didn't catch it, Judith has little boots like daddy. With Justin's fate revealed, the campsite is about to erupt in a full-blown riot. Some blame Daryl, some blame Annie, or Anne. It doesn't matter. Maybe it does. It's Anne. Anyway, Father Gabriel shows us some guts, stepping forward to protect his new lady. He'll regret that later. Anyway, Rick shows up and just in time. 15 minutes into the episode and the search for the killer begins. Rick asks Gabe to keep an eye out for Anne. He's only got one eye, Rick. Also, a little side note, Gabriel's look is actually a look from a different character in the comic, a savior. But it looks better on Gabriel. I like it. Anyway, he questions Daryl with one of the best Rick speeches in this series.
All I ask is that you try. Do it. Let people see it. Maybe everyone moves past what's happened to what could happen. And maybe, just maybe, it'll be one of the best decisions you ever make. Like not killing a guy who left your brother on a rooftop to die.
Hard hitting, yeah, but doing little to persuade Daryl. 23 minutes in, and we get our Walker threat. Some cluster up by a house with an official callback to Season 1. The Walkers in the house, poking their fingers through the wood cracks, is a direct callback to the pilot episode and the iconic hospital doors. The action leads to a suspicious scene with a woman from Oceanside knocked out and A-Rat missing. Someone is targeting saviors only, and the knocked out woman's weapon looks a lot like what could have been used to kill Justin. Later we find out A-Rat wasn't killed right away because the woman who took her kept her alive for Cindy to kill. A few of the survivors split up to look for A-Rat. Come morning, and most likely in the next episode, that'll play a big part in the tensions breaking down and maybe a conflict popping off between the saviors and our heroes. Anyway, Rick goes with Carol, giving us a nice scene between Season 1 survivors who have had their own conflicted history together, but also learned from one another, and they grew a mutual respect and friendship, calling back to Season 1, Episode 2, and also connecting to what Carl wanted and talked about, his father being like he was back then.
Look here, Merle. Things are different now. Only dark meat and white meat. There's us and the dead. Because it's us or the dead. And every life counts now. We survive this by pulling together, not apart. To build life, not take it.
The man who would go back to Atlanta to rescue Merle Dixon of all people. Daryl and Maggie, seen holding Glenn's watch, split off together. Maggie reveals the sliver of hope she has for Rick's way only exists because his way is best for her son Herschel. Now cut to Anne returning to the heaps, and she uncovers a small container with what appears to be a walkie-talkie professional CB radio, which can reach ranges of about up to 15 miles. Placing a battery in it, she uses it to ask an unknown person if they're the ones taking the saviors. A voice responds, asking if she has an A or a B. They aren't the ones taking the saviors, but because things with the saviors are slowly falling apart, Anne wants to leave, asking the voice what it will take. He replies, an A. Father Gabriel suddenly reveals himself. Not like that. He pops out from behind some trash. She does show some real emotion here when confronted, appearing to actually care for Gabriel. She admits her old group were trading people for supplies. Now we see some of these supplies in Season 8. After Simon kills her group, she uncovers a hiding spot with a box of canned applesauce. On the cans, there's a symbol of 3 rings. The same symbol is painted on the helicopter. They were going to trade Gabriel in Season 7, and then Rick and Negan in Season 8. With Rick, she marked his container with the letter A and brings out a chained walker. At the time it looked like she was going to have the walker bite Rick, but he fought his way out. With Negan, she packs up, appearing to trade Negan for herself and go with the helicopter people. The flare ends up getting ruined and the helicopter leaves. She tells Gabe, "We can have a life like you can't imagine." So it's either a well-established group or it's not as nice or as big of a place as Anne believes it is. Gabe can't leave his people. They've been through far too much, so she knocks him out, telling him she thought he was a B. Now this story has a lot of fans wondering, what is A and what is B? Is it as simple as someone who's not bitten versus someone who's bitten, someone who's strong versus someone who's weak? Is it that simple, or is it a little more complex? And I know this story cracks the flow slightly. With the constant inclusion of the trash people and their constant betrayal, the helicopter reveal and what Anne does next will determine the level of frustration with a lot of fans. Most just want her dead and gone, or for our survivors to finally stop trusting her. Back to Rick and Carol. They run into Jed and DJ. They had the great idea to attack people with guns and try to get them to give up their guns. They're lucky they got as far as they did. Anyway, they don't want to kill them. They just want to leave the campsite and get the hell home. Jed comes out of this wounded but alive. It's a scene that seems to serve Carol most of all, showing that she's trusting in Rick's way but also healing from her breakdown in previous seasons. 40 minutes into the episode and we get to the best moment of the episode. Maggie and Daryl hit the jackpot. They find the missing fuel, as well as their missing savior A-Rat. This episode had mostly strong moments and a sprinkle of convenience, but this ending is hard-hitting. The girls from Oceanside have been killing the saviors who killed their family when Simon rolled through and gave them a final warning. When Maggie hanged Gregory, the girls realized they could get justice for themselves for what happened. A-Rat, on her knees, tearful, and seemed like she was fully on board to become one of them, and she begs Maggie and Daryl to help her. Cindy throws A-Rat's past actions right back at her. A-Rat, smiling, tormented Cindy before killing her 11-year-old brother. And the final words she chose all those months ago would end up coming right back around, sealing her fate as well. Karma is an unrelenting bitch sometimes. A-Rat begs Maggie once again, but Maggie wants to know what she said.
No exceptions.
No exceptions. No exceptions!
A-Rat looks to Maggie and Daryl once more. Little does she know, Negan said those exact same words before brutally beating Glenn's head into pieces with Lucille. Maggie doesn't see A-Rat. She sees a shadow of darkness, a shadow of Negan, and she'll be damned if she interferes with Cindy's desire for justice. She can't bring herself to make a decision like Rick made a decision when she felt he had no right, especially after repeated promises to kill Negan. Maggie and Daryl, reminded of that dreadful night in the woods, turn their backs on A-Rat and walk away, leaving Cindy to jam a spear into the back of her head. A scene that was perfectly crafted, leaving many fans to debate whether or not Daryl and Maggie did the right thing. We transition into a shot of Rick watching the saviors leaving the campsite, and the theme comes right back around from the beginning. A tomato, the symbolism of Rick's promise to make it real for Carl, is stomped to mush under their feet as they leave, dooming the fate of not only the bridge, but of the relationship between the two neighboring communities. Back over to Daryl and Maggie. They mention their talk at the end of Season 8 and explain why they waited. They gave Rick's way a chance. But now the girls from Oceanside have opened Maggie's eyes, and with a haunting score, Maggie says,
We gave Rick's way a chance. It's time to see Negan.
All right.
Now I'm continuing to enjoy this new season. I'm dreading the loss of Rick coming up in the next 2 episodes. However, this episode in particular was like a wind-up punch, where I felt like it was lacking some oomph throughout it, even though I was enjoying it, and little did I know, the entire episode was just a fist being pulled back and ready to launch forward right in our guts. Whether you agree with Maggie or not, that was one hell of an ending, and I love its connection with the saviors, the communities, Simon. I love how we're seeing the consequences, even after the war, even after connecting and uniting, we're seeing the consequences of a person's actions coming back to haunt them. However, I can't stop this feeling that episode 5, the last episode with Rick Grimes, is either going to be a cliff and ratings are gonna plummet, or it will be a catapult and it'll skyrocket this series into a whole new beginning. Put your thoughts and opinions down in that comment box. Thank you very much. And stay tuned, because next is deeper into The Walking Dead episode 904, The Obliged.